Hello again, fellow quilters, and welcome to Patchwork Quilts with Diane. My name's Diane, and today in this video I'd like to share with you the Queen of Hearts. So it's from design to the process of buying the fabric and the making of the quilt. It's a commission quilt, so if you're interested in any of that, why don't you grab yourself a nice drink, make yourself comfy, and we'll have a little chat. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to refer to my customer as Lady G. And Lady G contacted me and she asked if I would make a bespoke quilt for her daughter. She wanted it to match the decoration in her daughter's bedroom, and she wanted it to be in lilacs, white and soft pinks. Well, there wasn't anything in my shop to match those colours. So I asked her what size quilt she'd like, and she said she'd like it to be approximately 62 inches square. So that's pretty standard of the quilts I make in my shop, so yeah, okay. And then I asked her what sort of design she was looking for, and she was really great because she sent me some photos, and that is much better than an explanation, because whatever is in my mind when I describe something, it might not translate as well to someone else's imagery without a photograph. And so she sent me some pics, and they were all different, but they all had the same theme of being scrappy pinks, soft pinks like a ballerina pink, and hearts. There was lots of hearts. And so I said yes, I'd be interested. And so later that evening, still on the 26th, I designed the quilt, and then I went searching for fabric and I ordered some. And this was the design. So you can see it's a simple 5x5, and there's two distinct blocks. There's a heart block, and then there's a block with a pinwheel, and then four corners in the lilac. And so they'll form an Irish chain with a pinwheel in the centre, so it adds that lovely movement. And then I put a border of pink squares around the edge of that, and I've just carried out the lilac into that border, and then I had a 3-inch border of the lilac, and then I had a little on-point square in white on the corner, and then a very narrow strip of the lilac just to preserve the points and take it up to 62 inches square. And I thought, yeah, I look forward to making that. And so the commission quilt was agreed in principle, and I went online to look for the fabric, and I went into Amazon. I knew what I wanted for the white and the lilac. I wanted a John Loudon. I've used that designer before, and I've seen a design called Cottage Weaving. That's the design I used in this quilt, and it's really lovely. I like the quality, I like the price, and so I ordered the white and the lilac for the quilt from that shop. And then I searched around and I found a lovely small business operating in the UK from Worcester. I'm not going to say anything else about it. And they had a really lovely bundle of Tilda fat quarters. There was 10 in their bundle, and they were a range of pinks and whites. And so I ordered that. And so I've got some notes here. It gets a little bit complicated. Let me explain. So I designed the quilt on the 26th. It was late when I ordered the fabric. The lilac and the white arrived on the 30th of January, so I was really pleased with that. And the Tilda fabric was going to arrive a little bit later, so still plenty of time. They said it would arrive by no later than the 4th. Well, the 4th of February, my birthday, was on a Sunday. I keep going on about my birthday. And it didn't arrive. And so the 5th I expected it, didn't arrive. So on the 6th of February I contacted them, and they said it was running late, to bear with them. And then on the 7th of February I contacted them and said, I'm not happy and what's going on. And they said I had two options. I could either have a full refund, and then if the fabric does arrive, I can keep that with their apologies, or I could reorder again. So I went away and thought about that, and I went online and looked at the reviews. I got to say, if I'd have seen the reviews before I ordered the fabric, I probably wouldn't have ordered the fabric from this company. It was all to do with delivery, and the reviews were all 1 star. It was pretty bad. And so I decided to cancel. If it does arrive ever, it's the 15th of February now, I will be surprised. I'm not going to name and shame because they're a small business and these things sometimes do happen, but really they need to get their delivery sorted. They apologised and said they were having delivery problems, but according to the reviews, it's been happening for quite a while. And so I thought, okay, I'm short of time now. I'll go to my local fabric store and I'll pick up a selection of pink and white fabrics. Pink and white fabrics, you think that's pretty standard colour, but no. There were different shades of pink, and there were pinks with blacks and pinks with blues and pinks with greens. There were shocking pinks, there were purpley pinks. They didn't have the ballerina-y pink and white that my customer wanted. So I did buy some fabrics. I had a voucher for my birthday. Did I mention my birthday? I had a voucher, and I bought some lovely fabrics. I'll show you that another time. So I came home, back on the computer. It took me hours looking for fabric. Anyway, I did find a bundle. It's always a bit of a risk, isn't it, when you buy from a new company, because the photographs can alter slightly the colour, but also the quality and delivery. I found 2 bundles that I like the look of. I decided with the one, and I ordered 2 sets. There were 8 quarters in the bundle, so I ordered 2 sets of those, kept my fingers crossed, and it arrived. Thankfully, I really liked it. And this is the lovely fabric that I've chosen. This is Cottage Weaving by John Loudon, 100% cotton. Everything's 100% cotton that I'm using. And it's a soft lilac. It's looking darker on film than in actual life, with this lovely weave through. And the white is the same design, tone on tone, and I've paired that with a lovely selection of pinks. Well, I ordered 2 bundles of mixed pink fabric. So we have this soft pink, and that goes lovely with a lilac, a traditional old rose, and some soft pink florals, some little cherries and hearts, soft pink and hearts, some cherries and stripes. And then there was this white with a pink bow, and then a white with these little tangerines or berries on. And I decided not to use these 2 last pieces. I decided against this one because of the stark white background, and that wouldn't show up the heart shape so much. And this one was a little bit too orange, so it didn't really work with the rest of the quilt. So those are the 6 pinks, and I'm using those in a scrappy fashion. Well, it's nice and early, and everything is waiting for me in my sewing room. All of the pieces are cut. My first little batch to sew, 4 3/4 inch squares. Lots of bobbins filled. And so I'm going to put the radio on and sit down with a drink of water, and we'll see how we get on today. So I was at that excited stage where everything is in place to start making this quilt. And then I had a message on the 9th of February from Lady G asking how I was getting on, which is quite reasonable, and I would have contacted her earlier apart from this fabric debacle. I wanted to just make sure that the pink sewed okay before I contacted her. Anyway, I was able to say, this is the design, hope you like it. She loved the design, and this is a sample block of the hearts. Are you happy with that? And she was very happy with that. And I was happy with the way that the fabric worked together. So I had everything ready the night before. I came into my sewing room the next morning and had a really good day. So step 1 I've sewn together 14 of these 4 3/4 inch pink squares with white, and I've snipped off the corner. I've pressed them already. I've snipped off the corners, and now I'm going to cut these into half square triangles on the diagonal, and this one I'm setting aside for the corner of the quilt. And I've cut them on the diagonal, then I'll finger press them open. So I'll put together a variety of these different pinks in the centre to form an on-point star with a white surround, and I need 13 of those. And I'm chain piecing these together, and I'm starting at the top of the half square triangle where there isn't a seam, so there's 2 flat pieces of fabric together, and then when I get down to this part I shall nest this seam there. Make sure there's a good 1/4 inch seam there, and then we should have some nice points to play with. Well, I'm really pleased with the way these fabrics are working together. Look, they are so pretty. So I've made 13 of those on-point squares, or scrappy half square triangles. And now on my board I have 13 of the white 4 3/4 inch squares and a combination of 13 of the pinks. And I'm going to repeat the last process and make a selection of half square triangles again. And I'm just going to share another little tip with you. When I'm sewing these 4 3/4 inch squares together, just see on the pattern side I've sewn 3 of the sides with the pattern side up, and now for the 4th side I will flip it over. And there's 2 reasons for that. The first one is I can check these seams to make sure that they're all level and I haven't missed anything. But also the machine is your friend, and it has these feeder dogs, and they can help us avoid getting little pleats that sometimes occur in the corner. So if I sew the 4 sides all facing up, sometimes there's a little pleat in this corner, but when you turn it over, that eliminates that problem. Well, Lady G didn't give me a time for when she wanted this quilt. She just asked me to make it. But I sort of felt under pressure to make it quite quickly. I don't know why, I just did. And so I did a lot of chain piecing in this quilt. So the first thing I did was to make 13 of the hearts, white hearts, with a pink on-point square in the centre. And then I made 12 of the pinwheel blocks. So I'll show you how I made those. Well, I've sewn half of those half square triangles with the pinks together, so they form a V in the white, and that's going to sit on top of that pink on-point square. So there's the pink on-point square, and there is the V. So I'm just going to sew that on the top, and then I'll sew the 2 white half square triangles together, and I'll sew the bottom on. So that set is all sewn together, and now the 2 whites have been sewn together in a V this time, and they'll go onto the bottom. So that will be the centre part of the block. Well, that's come together really nicely. Look how bright that white is against those soft pinks. And now my next step is to take 13 4 3/4 inch squares in the white and the pink and sew them together again and make half square triangles. And so now I'm going to work on the side blocks that fit on that centre panel, and there are 2 full white squares, 3-inch white squares, and they have a half square triangle of pink and white sewn each side. And so there are 13 sets for the left and 13 sets for the right. So what I've done is just shuffled about these half square triangles to make sure that they're not all the same on each block. So I'm going to sew these together, and then I'll add a little pink 3-inch square to the bottom of each. And those are the 2 sides complete, so I'll sew those on, and that will be block 1 finished. And there we are. That is the 13 hearts complete, and the pink fabrics are working really well together. That is enough contrast with that white for the heart to stand out. Very delicate, very feminine. That's working well. So now I'm going to go on to the pinwheels. So the first thing I'm going to do is to make 12 of these pinwheels, and I want those to be all scrappy, and I'm going to make the 4 cornerstones. So that's a white on-point square with 3 corners in the lilac and 1 corner in the pink. So that's my next job. And now I've sewn those 4 on-point white squares with the 3 half square triangles in lilac and the 4th in pink. And I've sewn all of the pinwheels. And so now I'm just putting 2 of the 3-inch squares at the top of each block. Well, I put 2 of the 3-inch pink squares on top of the pinwheel, and then I also put 2 on the bottom. I didn't film that part, and then I put the sides on. I hope that clears that up. So those 12 are sewn now, and on each side I need to put 2 3-inch pink squares together and then 4 cornerstones in the lilac. So I shall do that, and that will be all the blocks complete. Look how beautiful they look. Well, once I'd sewn all of the blocks, I could have just assembled, I put a red mark around the outside, the 5x5 centre part, and then I could have put the border on around the outside of that. But sometimes I like to make the border while I'm making the blocks in the same construction, so then when I piece the thing together eventually, it's all made apart from the very narrow strip of border around the outside. And so I'll show you how I did that. So first of all, I took the 8 pinwheels that are on the outside of the quilt and I added some of the border blocks, and I'll show you how I did that. So what I'm going to do next is take 8 of these 4x4 blocks with a pinwheel in, and I'm just adding a row of 4 blocks along one edge, and I'll do that on 8 of those blocks, and this is forming the outside border as we go. So once I completed those 8, I then did the 4 heart blocks. So there's one on the top, one on the bottom, and one on each side. And so I had to put the border on the top of that one, the side of that one, the bottom of that one, and the side of that one. So they are directional, these hearts, so you just have to make sure that you're putting the border in the right place. So I've put 2 of the pink, and then I've put 2 of the lilac cornerstones in each block. And now I'm going to do a similar thing with the 4 cornerstones, but I'm just going to put the top ones with a top border and the bottom ones with a bottom border, and I'm going to leave the sides for now. And the reason I only put the tops or the bottoms on these 4 is because on the sides I needed to make sure that the border had the lilac 3-inch attached to it to fit that cornerstone on. And that becomes much clearer when I piece these together. So I'm going to put 3 pinks and 1 lilac, 3 pinks and 1 lilac, and the same on the top. And now I'm working on the sides. So this is the bottom right hand corner, and you can see I've got those pink squares with a 3-inch lilac square. I've also got a lilac border, 3 inches, and now I'm working away down the side. So I've got 3 pink, 1 lilac, a 3-inch border, and I've got the cornerstone. So I'll put those together. And so it's this bottom right hand corner that I've just worked on. And that looks like that. So now I'm going to go over onto the bottom left and repeat that process. And that's the bottom left complete. And so now I'm just going to repeat that process along the top. So once I'd completed the top and the bottom, I just had the side 3 squares, 3 blocks to do on each side. And so that was the same principle, add in the pink scrappy border and then add in 1 piece of the lilac. And I've already put these pink and then the lilac and pink squares to the right of the quilt. So now I'm going to join these together, and then I'm going to add a 3-inch lilac border all the way down that side. And now I'm going to repeat that for the left hand side. Isn't it pretty? I keep saying this, how pretty it is. And then the central part of the quilt was blocked as usual. So I joined it by going across the middle, so there was 3 blocks across the middle in one piece, and then it was just a matter of adding the top and the bottom, and then the quilt was complete. And I'll show you a close-up of how that border is unnoticeable when it's all quilted. And I'll give you a close-up now of this border on the blocks method. I'll use it where I can. You can't always. If you've got a big pattern, well, you could, but you'd have to match and you'll just waste too much fabric doing it that way. But on a fabric like this, the border is just 2 colourways and a small overall design. And if I take you in really closely, there, you can see there was a join there. I've taken the quilting right out to the narrow border, and you don't have to get too far away for it to be lost, those joins. And it helps the border lay flat. It helps to square up the quilt as you're going. So I've made this quilt as robust as possible for my customer's daughter. So I've put an extra row of stitching here just to make sure that none of these seams pop. Washing and wearing, I expect, with a younger person. And there's 2 rows of stitching there, and then on the binding you can see I've put a row of stitching on the inside, and then I've added an extra row of stitching, and that's to make sure that if there is wear and tear it's not going to go into big holes. So a lovely crosshatch, you can see that on the back there. And that's it, finished. The Queen of Hearts. Well, I think it's met the brief. It's lilac, white and scrappy pink, a soft pink. There's lots of movement with those pinwheels and that Irish chain connection. I think that sort of makes this quilt a little bit special. So it's quite a simple quilt to make. They're just 2 different blocks and it's arranged in a 5x5 square. I made it a little bit more complicated by adding the border as I went. But I think that just looks lovely, and I'm pleased I did it that way because it was easier for me to sew, and it helps the border lay flat, and it makes squaring up the quilt much easier, and I think she should like that. So I shall get some photos taken and I'll put that in my shop for her to collect. I'll show you the back, and it's a pieced back, so it's in a soft pink with a white polka dot, and then there's a white cotton section and just a strip of the lilac from the front. And there's a close-up of my label, made with love by me, Diane Davis, and it was. And this is how the quilt will look on a bed. So it's a nice size topper. And I think that looks really romantic, really pretty. Well, I finished the quilt on Valentine's Day, 14th of February, and I left a message with Lady G to say that I'd uploaded some images on my Etsy shop, and whenever she was ready to have a look, to let me know and I would post it. I don't want to put it on my shop and someone else come along and buy it. There wasn't any formal agreement with this commission quilt. She's under no obligation to buy it, so once she goes into my Etsy shop and has a look, if she doesn't like the look of it, then she doesn't have to buy it, and it will sit there, and I'm sure someone else somewhere would like it because it is really beautiful. And I am trying to get my stocks up in my shop, although I've sold 2 quilts this month, so that's good news. And I have got a potential person that would love it. My granddaughter's been around and she really wants it, so there will be a good home for it if Lady G doesn't want it. So that's my experience with a commission quilt, and I hope you found it interesting the way I sometimes put the border on the blocks as I go. That can help with the weight sometimes. And I will see you again next week. So thanks very much for your company. Take really good care of yourselves, you must. And I will see you again soon. Bye.